feel like me covering Monarchs is like me admitting that I'm out of video ideas. But nevertheless, welcome back to another episode of Gimmicky Tech, the series where I tell you how to play irrelevant decks with equally irrelevant cards. Today we're talking about Monarchs, everyone's favourite tubeling deck, until Retrain, Draco Slayer and his posse took their spot. Monarchs was a topic I was kind of putting off for a while, because I knew it was going to be a big project for me, and I'm incredibly lazy, but at the same time, Monarchs have a lot of potential for decks, and also a lot of potential for tech ideas, so I couldn't resist doing it. While Layer opens the gates to all these weird and funky tubeling techs, Monarchs are the opposite, as they benefit from all these weird tech options, and I'm hoping to cover as many of those as possible. But first, the history lesson. Also, fair warning, this isn't going to be, well, funny at points, because trying to make Monarchs funny and relatable is a task that should be left for people who can actually write. And I can't write if you have read any of my old reviews on my old blog site. So yeah, let's just move on. While most people may know Monarchs for their structure deck, which enable them to be tier 1 for a while, Monarchs date back all the way to 2003, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, this archetype is nearly as old as me. Anyway, cutting to the chase, this archetype was more of a bunch of level 6 monsters who also happen to have level 8 variations with their own themed Monarch backthrow support card until we got the structure deck. And with the arrival of Emperor Darkness, which was the structure deck, the archetype became a lot more relevant, with it introducing not only the best field spell in the history of the game, I'm not joking, and also giving us a level 8 Monarchs, well, the two new ones, which would become their boss monsters, Ether and Herberus. And this is where I would presume Monarchs just went bonkers as a meta deck. While I was even playing Yu-Gi-Oh! At the time, since this was during the break I took between 2015 and 2017, I want to say this is when Domain and Extra Deck Monarchs had dominated the meta space before it had its 3 main cards hit. Monarchs would later drop off the mat with those hits, and I want to say they were still a viable rogue option until the meta became too fast for them. I know I'm making a lot of assumptions, but I had trouble finding reliable data from back then. Right now, I'm going off what I remembered of my locals, where we had 3 Monarch players excluding me, and that was 2018. Anyway, the deck had a lot of post-structure support, with the most recent one being Restoration from Flames of Destruction. Now, while the archetype might as well be as old as time itself, it doesn't mean the deck is slower than Venom's when trying to make the boss monster. In fact, the deck is quite competent at making decent boards, and that's if you're playing Extra Deck Monarchs like a heretic. If you're playing Domain, your boards are going to be slow to build up, but there are a lot of good options to slow down your opponent. I might as well also put this out there. This video is going to be focusing on Domain builds. I'm not confident enough or willing enough to learn Extra Deck variants. So if you want to learn Extra Deck Monarchs, I'll go link a good video by someone else in the description if I can find one. Now with most of my viewers are gone, let's just move to the breakdown, because there's a lot of cards we need to talk about. So Monarchs have a lot of support, so I'm going to group all the cards up, and I'm really just stop on the noteworthy ones. So let's get the main level 6 out of the way. Now, I'm only going to say this once. You only want to run Theseus, Calcius, and Visor in your main, and here's why. Theseus is a hand ripper with a burn effect attached. Klaus is your main form of removal, and Visor is your other form of removal when you don't want to be doing it via destructive needs. As for the others, Zarborg is fine, but seeing its limited monsters, well, the other two removal options are generic. It's better to run them over Zarborg. Mobius is a side deck option into heavy back row decks, and Grandmark shouldn't be wheeled out of his basement unless, we want to enter a flip meta, which is not likely going to happen, because you saw what happened to Crawlers. They didn't do shit. Also, this would be a good time to mention that most Monarch monster effects are mandatory. So just be wary of that, because if you summon Klaus with no targets, you're kind of screwed, because he will have to banish himself, and that's a waste of resources. Anyway, let's talk about the other level 6 Monarchs now. So we currently have 3 other non-main level 6 Monarchs, and only two of them are kind of viable. Like, first we have Kuraz, who's your main one. You want to run at 1 or 2 that synergize with Ether for either consistency or extra removal. Del can be sided and replaced with Kuraz in matchups where you want to get rid of the graveyard. Just keep in mind, he will mill the same amount of cards he does banish. So, don't play that against decks like Lightsworn. And finally, we have Argdamal, I can't pronounce it, which may have its niche. But if you want to see your back row cards more often, but, since it's a tribute effect, while the other two are like normal / special summon effects, it's not really worth it. Also, Illusionating Snatcher is a thing who can be run if you want, well, more consistency with just monsters on the board. Now covering the Mega Monarch group, who is legit the same as the original group, with minor differences. Like, the gimmick with the Mega group is the fact that they only need one tribute for their tribute summon monsters, something which Domain does get around, so keep that in mind. In this case, you still want the main 3 of Theseus, Rise, and Klaus you want to run, but there's also one other Monarch who also carries his weights now. Theseus now lets you look at your opponent's hand, making him a great with cards like Mind Crush. Klaus can banish up to 2 cards if summoned with a dark monster, and remove extra copies of the banished card if it's dark, which gives it great synergy with Layer Engine. Visor allows you to bounce and recycle now, giving him pretty standard recovering your vessels, or vassals, whatever you want to say, and your other spells. Zarbog is the one that carries his weight now, because he can now remove cards from extra deck depending on the level of the card popped. Battles could be kind of a liability if they have any floaters like Herald. As for the other two, Mobius can pop up to 3 now and deny them reaction to the effect thanks to its bonus effect. And Granrog lets you pop 2 set cards and draw a card. It's still disappointingly bad, so just run the main 3 with Zarbog and Mobius inside if you want to run a Mega Monarch build only. Now covering the vassals, because there are a lot of Monarch monsters and I want to save the bosses for last. They are all bad in their own way, but they all have their own situations where they could be useful. The gimmick with the vassals are supposed to be monsters that synergize with their Monarch, with special summon conditions. So let's go through each one and see why some of them are bad. Well, some, I say some, but most of them are bad. So first things first, we've got Lucius requiring graveyard setup, and lets you look at set cards. Is only useful if you got removal in hand to deal with it. Mithra can be useful due to the fact he gives you an extra normal summon if you use it as tribute fodder, but it also gives your opponent a free token to work with, unless you can remove it. Berlinith is probably the second best one, but he does cost hand resources, and his tribute effect is just worse than Mega. And Gram has its niche, but it's useless in opening hands, but at least has to be the vote of vassals is pretty good. Landrobe is a Book of Moon with Vassal Recycle, but is also useless in opening hands if you're going turn 1. And finally, Esh is just bad since it relies on your opponent's back row and has no extra effects. Now, normally, you wouldn't want to run these cards, so if you're being silly with these, my ratios would probably be like 2 to 3 Landrobes in the side for when you're going second, 1 Gram, 3 Mithra, and 0 to 3 Bearlith if you feel like you can afford the hand resources to summon him. Now, moving into the cards that replace the need for vassals in any Monarch deck, we have the Squires, who are legit 3-offs in any Monarch deck. Iya is not only a 1-for-1 target, she can special a vassal from deck, which is going to be Idios, who gives you an extra normal summon if he's normal or specialed. She's also searchable by reinforcements because she's a warrior for some reason, not a fairy like her counterpart, which is exactly what this deck needs. More consistency! What were they smoking back then to make god tier cards like this? Not to sound angry, Edie is essentially just a 1-card combo into any Monarch, and both have excellent recovery options. Of course, Iya enables other vassals if you want to be cheesy with vassals. You want to do it via Idia. Also, if you want, you could try to get away with 1 Idia in some Monarch decks, but this depends on how comfortable you are with either having Domain in your hand, or other tribute fodder cards due to Eos allowing the looping of Idia, and that's your call to make there. Okay, we finally made it to the final monsters, Ether and Obus, and one of them is arguably a one-off. Okay, so Ether is straight up a free-off. Well, it could be a straight-up free-off in some decks, but due to its effective special from deck or hand, like a Monarch, giving the deck more search power, and she can summon herself during the opponent's turn for disruption plays, that's pretty good. She also has a spell/trap dump effect on summon, which actually has synergy with the deck thanks to cards like Prime. She's just so good, which I can't really say for Obus. It's legit just Ether, but he can now castell a card and recycle, well, Monarch spell traps. I'm pretty sure he's only a zombie, so the deck has an out zombie world. Run him at 1, and maybe 2 more in the side if your locals is dominated by zombie.decks who like to size zombie world. Now, we get to the part I dread, the back row support. I dread this part mainly because there's too much of it. So let's just rapid through the bad ones first. March is a decent protection card, but you have room to run it. It means you have room to run combo/stun cards. The first Monarch is a good Mega Monarch build card, but it's way too slow and only useful in combinations with other cards. Dark Advance is gimmicky as hell, but yet again, only useful in combination with other cards. By Order of the Emperor isn't even a Monarch card, but it's instead a counter to Monarchs and should only be used for memes because look at that card art. Strike can be useful, but you are losing resources for a negate. That becomes an attribute swap in Grave. And finally, Frostblast is just slow and bad Mobius. Now with the trash toss aside, let's talk about the decent cards, and this is also going to be rapid fire at the same time. Tenacity is an obvious free-off, since there's a back row searcher, who's also going to be searching you one-off. Return is a slow, but also a central card for keeping momentum, so you can run it at 2. Restoration is a 0 to 2 off, depending on the build due to its recovery effect. Stormforth is a 2 to 3 off for a very good reason, but you can also side deck it if you don't really want it. Awaken is a side deck option you can run if you want to make your big boys immune to stupid ass shenanigans. And Escalation is only an option if you want to be a dick with Stormforth. So let's just move to the really good ones now. First off, we have Pantherism, a card that is still limited for a very good reason. This card is not only a +1, it can banish itself for more search power. This is one of the main enablers for Monarch since it's a searchable draw power with search effect, which gives the deck way too much consistency. Like, between this card, Kuraz, Return, Tenacity, and Prime, this deck has a lot of draw and search power. Obviously you want to run this in all your builds, and you want to max it out if this card is ever moved up from 1. Next, we have what I call the best field spell in the game, which is a bit of an exaggeration, but it's up there. Domain. This card is the reason why I love Monarch so much. Considering most decks these days rely too much on the extra deck to do their plays, Domain just being able to tell them, no, stop that, get your Neophyte combos out of here, is amazing. It enables Mega Monarch builds to, by allowing the levels of Megas to be lowered so they can be truly summoned with 1 monster, which is also really good. Of course, there's downsides, like the card losing effect if you don't control a truly summoned monster, or your opponent controls one now, and the fact you can't play, extra deck options, which means you don't have the ability to do, Ghost Reaper or anything like that. But, there's ways around that, like Vanities, and not running extra deck like a fucking heretic. Run at 3 if you plan to not commit heresy. Next is Erupt, and it's a double-edged sword. The good thing is the fact that it's a skill drain that doesn't affect true summon monsters, but the downside is the fact it's a skill drain that affects everything else. So practically makes Idia and Eos useless, and makes board building much more slow and painful than it already was, which is probably why you want to run Vassals in some cases. It also dies if you don't control a tribute summon monster, so just keep that in mind. Just run it at 2 to 3 in the side, or 3 in main if you're going for a stun variation. For the final Backo card, we have Prime Monarch, which is a 2 to 3 off, depending on how much you hate seeing it in your opening hand. It's just really a recycle and draw card that can be populated for more draw power via Kuras, and then it can flow into being tribute fodder. It's highly searchable, so 2 is good enough, but you can risk it with 1 copy, depending on how risky you feel. As long as you have it in your deck, you should be fine. That's all this what I want to talk about, so I guess we can jump into builds, but I want to focus on one thing for this part, and that's building an optional Monarch deck, or a Domain one at least. So, now, I'm probably the last person who should be probably up to the task, but, fuck it. I have like 2 years of Domain Monarch on me. What's the harm of trying? Of course, if any Domain Monarch player is, watching this, feel free to comment below, below your own builds, and any gripes you have with my build, because to be honest, you're probably more better at this than me. I'm not gonna lie, but let's just move on. Now, when building the optional Domain deck, there's a few key cards any variation needs. This being Domain, Pantherism, Tenacity, Prime, and the Squires. These are the core of any good Monarch deck. While some people would argue Ether and Kuras are also staples, I think there are some variations that can get away with not running these cards. Return can also be run in a lure of even more draw power cards if you'd rather be searching than playing the Yu-Gi-Oh! Lottery. So that's our foundation set. So now we're going to build the main part. So we can use a lot of funky cards here, but let's first lay out the fact that you need to decide if you're running Monarch or Mega Monarch variation. While both versions of the Monarchs can exist in a deck, depending on the tech you're using, it's usually beneficial to focus on either the Virgin level 6 Monarchs or the level 8 Mega Monarch Chads. Now, while I am being obviously extremely biased against level 6, there is benefits to running the level 6 build. Mainly, it's now as consistent as a Mega build now due to its, Celestial Observatory being their trade-in equivalent. And there are a lot of good level 6 you can splash in, but it's also less risky than a Mega Monarch build. The thing with the Mega Monarch build is the fact they live or die by the fact they hit either Restoration with cards in the graveyard, or Domain with cards to tribute. If you don't get those on board, you just got your one-way ticket to Brick City. I mean, the same can be said with the level 6s, but the level 6s also need one tribute photo card at all times, while Mega Monarchs need Domain to reach that condition. Of course, with more risk, there's more reward, and with Mega Monarchs, you are getting more powerful effects, beefier bodies, and the be the run trade-in, which is much better in the long run with cards like Restoration and Pot of Avarice. So, it's really just a case if you want to play it safe, or you want to play it dangerously. So, we have picked our desired variation. It's time to pick the Monarchs, and if you are paying attention, you should know the ratios. 3 Theseus, 3 Class, 3 Visor in the main, with 3 Mobius in the side. So we have 24 cards in the deck now. Time to add the optional tech, and it depends on what you want. Return can be ran if you want to be able to search your Monarchs, or you could run the previously mentioned Celestial Observatory for more draw power. You can also run Ethers, 2 Ethers and a Kuras with an Herbalist in the main or the side. If you want to go a little bit more stun focused, you can run Eruption, but I think that's better as a side option for when you actually need them. 2 Stormwolf isn't bad since it's highly searchable and recyclable, but that's all the boring archetypal stuff. So, let's just get to the real inconsistent shit. Starting with monsters, Fog King for the side. Yes, I'm recommending the card that used to be cited to dig over Monarch decks when they were meta, but Fog King is a master restrict on steroids. In other words, it's your budget solution to kaijus, doing its kaiju things, and can be a weird yet funky alternative boss monster. Another weird and funky alternative boss monster is Darkest Diablos. While this card is more at home with a Mega Monarch build, if you are building for extra deck, like a Heretic, and you hate Domain, a 3K monster, which is also level 8, of a tribute summoning is nothing to scoff at, especially since he can tribute himself for more hand control. Still on the topic of alternative boss monsters you can run over Ether, you can consider Egyptian gods, specifically Obelisk. If not, good for you, you can consider yourself still sane. Um, you can splash 2 to 3 obelisks in the deck, but that's if you plan to keep the domain build. You can't really run mounds, so you need to run march if you want to protect your obelisk. If you want to make it easier to enable obelisks, you want to consider running the vassals, since the ideal hand is like EDR into EDR, special vassal, and then tribute all 3 for obelisks. And then, you have domain and march out. So, you probably have searched that in some part of that. If you really want to be cheesy, you can run either Dreadroot or his other evil god counterparts or wicked gods, whatever they're called. But that's hurting yourself at that point. Just don't do that. On the topic of monsters still, but not possible boss monster substitutes, there's obviously the vanity monsters, but I feel like they are still side options if you need them. You could always just try Dazzling Lunar Dragon Celigaria, since outside of being a Monarch stat line, he has the same stats, so you can safely run Tenacity with it. It lets you bounce it to your hand for monster stealing, and since this is a quick effect, you can do it during your opponent's turn to run combos, or do it during your turn to effectively storm forth their cards. There's also the obvious battle card traps, like, Battle Fader and Traggodia, I think that's how you pronounce it, for free fodder, but honestly, you should be running Groz, since you can spawn a token if you take battle damage, which can be used to be tributed off. And also, before I forget, you can play original Diabolos for hand-based shenanigans with Mindcrush and Thesios, but, that's more for a Mega Monarch variant. My final monster to recommend is Kaiser Vorse Raider, and really just any cards that can special summon themselves, like Cyber Dragon, Guardian, Yalos, Red Layer, and all that. I'm picking Kaiser purely since it can become a beat stick under the right conditions, and your opponent does risk losing attack of monster if they're destroyed by battle. Of course, if they're smart enough, well, if you're smart enough actually, you could, just play Link Slayer as a much better option since it can set up Graveyard, and can be an alternative to Mobius. Also, before I forget, 10 Matiel, I think that's how you pronounce it, can be sided in to make Monarch summoning a lot more safer, but that's a little bit slower since you can't really special summon it. Moving to spells and traps, I don't really have much to suggest here outside of alternative draw power cards and tribute summoning cards. I already mentioned both Celestial Observatory and Trade-in for both variants, with Bowl of Avarice if you want more recycle. For tributing cards, there is Tribute Burial with, Mega Monarch decks and Soul Exchange for both variants, but more for the Monarch deck. You can also have Trial and Tribulation, which is making a return from the Layer Via for obvious reasons. For traps, I only have Trap Trick for back row searching if you plan to utilize cards like Dark Advance and Awaken, Mind Crush for hand ripping, and finally Paleozotics if you're going all in on a back row focused Monarch deck, so you can generate your own tribute fodder from activating back row. Since I'm obviously not good at thinking about my own tech options, feel free to suggest your own Monarch tech down below as well if you have any. I'm always welcome to the idea of people contributing to these videos. So, please do contribute. It's always good to have other people suggesting ideas for everyone, because that's what I want to kind of promote with these videos. An idea of, getting people in and being more fun with the deck and helping introduce people to these decks. I have a lot of experimental builds for Monarch decks, which I'm going to be showing off here. All these builds are designed with casual play in mind, so just keep that in mind before you take these to World, expecting it to be like 2016 and Monarchs are still tier 1. Feel free to use these builds as templates for your own builds, because yet again, I feel like most of these builds are kind of incomplete, and I really don't spend enough time with Monarchs to make these builds a little bit more consistent and better. So, because I'm usually wasting my time on time thief builds, but moving on. First, here's my version of a level 6 Monarch deck, utilizing Celigaria Tech and nothing else. It's a very vanilla Monarch deck, which you can use as a base. if you want, you can take out the restoration for Voda, so you can consistently see your Edia more often as well. And then, you can probably try to get away with fitting in a couple of 8s in here as well if you want. Second, we have my Mega Monarch build designed to be super vanilla, so no gimmicks here. If you want gimmicks, here's my experimental Thesos build designed around those funky hand shenanigans I keep going on about. Also, because I have a feeling I'm going to be, have someone asking this in the comments, the spell card in the side deck is DD Designator, which can be slotted in for more hand rips and more permanent removal if you don't want to be putting their cards in the graveyard. It's okay if you don't remember it, because I think everyone has replaced the D.D lineup in their brain with the vastly superior D/Ds, which doesn't hurt me inside at all. Thirdly, we have my layer build with the smokescreen into domain build with erupt. Yet again, nothing special, and you can take out Theseus for Lilith and remove the smokescreen side deck for pretty much actually better side deck cards. And if you want ideas for what you could put in that side deck, I would recommend checking out the layer video, where I have a lot of cards presented there for layer tech. I know I'm stumbling a lot because that was off script, and I just remembered I should have plugged my video in there. Lastly, we have my Dark Lord variant, which is, utilizes Dark Lords in place of Squires for more draw power and 2-bit fodder. Dark Lord engine is very stripped down to fit in the Monarch cards, but you can take out some of the Monarch cards if you want to run the Dark Lord traps if you desire, since I would argue Dark Lords have a lot better stun cards, because they have more permanent solutions compared to just, some of the crap that Monarchs can run. So, this was simultaneously the most fun I had with a video like this, but at the same time, it was the least fun I had. To elaborate, when I started with this script, I was full nostalgia. I remembered Monarchs being one of the first ever decks I just went bonkers on trying new card tech in. But as I did more research, it became more clear to me why I never went back to the deck once I started using Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro, because by the time I got into Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro, Monarchs weren't only outclassed by their more consistent and dominating rival, True Draco, but not only True Draco had the better boss monster, he was also able to utilize the Monarch back row a lot better, and it proved to be more of a threat compared to Monarchs just being annoying. Don't let my whining put you off though. Even if I consider True Draco to be better than Monarchs, I still have more fun with Monarchs, because Monarchs still have the better gimmicks and are infinitely more fun. So go out and try them. Just remember, if you stray off the path of Domain, I will hunt you down and burn your extra deck. But I trust you won't do that now. So don't. Hey guys, welcome to the end part, not unscripted. I'm doing it different for once. I'm not doing it at the end of my usual recording session. I'm just doing this at the end of my editing. It's a long video. Just want to come in and say thank you for watching. Pretty much, if you're wondering why I kind of to the end, it was a little bit more sloppy and all that, is because I finished first things first, I finished the script, and then all the audio recorded while I was still suffering from really bad food poisoning. So I didn't have any energy in me, because all the energy was literally coming out of my end. So yeah, that's what we did. Especially because around the time I got to the deck build part, not the building of the optional deck, just my builds in general, I was just kind of I'm just tired. I want to get this out. I just want to move on. It's kind of reason why I didn't really want to do Monarchs, because I knew by the end of it I'll be burnt out. But I thought, might as well get out of the way. So yeah, there you go. That's the Monarch video. I got my idea for the next 3 videos done. Oh, that's nearly uploaded. If you're watching that, well, I don't know why. It's not that good, to be honest. I could have done better, but I just followed with the guys' advice with just doing stream highlights. So anyway, here's me showing the script, because seriously, the script was 7 pages long. compared to my other scripts, like Jesus Christ. And there's also other stuff I didn't add. But yeah, it was a big script, a big job. But I have like something. I already got like intros written out for the next three videos I want to get out, each with their own different goal in mind. So the first one I want to do next is Charmers, which it would be more like a typical Gimmicky Tech video, history, cards, da da da. But then I kind of got one that was kind of inspired by me doing the Monarch video, Gracekeepers, because when I was doing the massive card rundown, like breakdown part of the archetype, I kind of went, shit, this series is just like Archetype Archive by, Rank 10 Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Vada. It's just that, but with fundamental differences, mainly me not being very funny. So I just went, well, fuck it. I could just use that as an excuse to just talk about Gracekeepers. Because I love Gracekeepers. They don't really have a lot of fun tech options. They don't have a lot of deck variants. But there's a lot of shit I want to talk about them. So I was like, fuck, I can do that. And then my, another one I want to do eventually is Destiny Hero. Mainly just focusing on like deconstructing the Destiny Hero deck that I mainly use. Because I feel like, in a way, for the Destiny Hero video, not many people get my intention with it, or how all the cards work in it. Because yet again, the main point of that Destiny Hero deck was the fact it was just a giant engine for like all these fusions. So I just want to break that down for like a whole entire video under that moniker. So that would be one of my more experimental videos. But I think the next one will mainly be Charmers. I probably won't be getting it done anytime this month, maybe next month. But yeah, if if you liked what you've seen, I know this isn't probably one of my best videos. I would still say, out of some of my videos, I think my best one so far has been the layer. Not so much the time thief. Like as time goes on, I don't really like the time thief video, but mainly I think the layer video is the good one. Also, if you're wondering why Oreo sounded a bit weird, especially compared to this one, I tried doing something called normalizing the Oreo, and then I realized the problem of the fact since each Oreo is different, it normalized each one differently to a different decibel. So I just was constantly just shifting Oreos to make sure it's like at the same level. I probably next time I'll do it, I'll make sure it's all stitched together into one big thing. So then I could just normalize that and then just have it all sort out like that. But yeah, that's it. Yep, stuttering because I'm off script. You know how I am with off scripts by now. But thanks for watching, and goodbye.